Hi everyone, it's Tammy with Shabby Fabrics. I have a really sweet summertime quilt for you today. This is Butterfly Patch. I love Butterfly Patch. It's very sweet and scrappy. The collection we used is called Kindred. That's by Moda Fabrics, and we did start that with a charm pack. So I'm going to show you some of my techniques for cutting up pre-cuts. In the kit, you're going to get a layer cake of whites, and you're going to get a charm pack of all your colored fabric. So I'm going to show you how I cut those all down before we begin making the quilt. All right? So the first thing we're going to do is I have some 10-inch squares here, and I just cut 10-inch squares out of white fabric. So when I have 10-inch squares, first of all, I'm definitely going to use a spinning mat. This is the rotating mat by Creative Grids. I love this tool. I use it all the time. It is my favorite rotating mat to use. It's very smooth, and when I push down on it, it's very stable and it's not sliding anywhere. All right, so I need to cut 5-inch squares. So I'm going to use a Creative Grids 6.5 by 12.5 inch ruler by Rachel Cross. I love this ruler. It has a lot of the grip on the back of it so that when I push down on it, the ruler's not going to move anywhere. So I'm going to set this on here. I'm going to make a cut. And now I'm just simply going to do hands off and spin that mat. There we go. I'm going to adjust my ruler. You see I have not touched my fabrics. And again, I'm cutting at 5 inches, just like that. So now I have 4 5-inch squares. Okay. So I have 5-inch squares in that, and I have 5-inch squares from the charm pack. I have a couple of different flower prints here. I've got a teal and a pink. All right. Now the next thing we have to do is we are trimming our 5-inch squares. We have to trim some of them to 4.5 inches. All right, so to do that, I'm going to use a Creative Grids 4.5 by 4.5. And I'm going to cut quite a few at a time here. I think I've got 6 or 8. I'm going to set this ruler in the center. You notice I placed the stripe on top. I did that on purpose, so that I can line up my stripe with my ruler and make sure that it's straight so that I'm not wonky on my stripe. All right, here we go. I like where that's at. So I'm pushing down fairly hard. I'm going to make a cut. We're going to rotate, cut, rotate, just like that, all the way around. That is the perfect way to cut 4.5-inch squares. I know exactly how big they are. I don't have to worry about them being slightly off because I used an exact 4.5-inch square ruler. Okay, I'll set those aside. The last thing we're going to cut is I'm going to trim one of these to an 8.5-inch square is the other square I need. So again, you guessed it, I'm using an 8.5-inch square ruler, and I am simply just going to cut all the way around. All right, that's all there is to the cutting for this quilt. How easy is that? I love that. All right, so I'm going to set these aside because they're for in the end when we're assembling. So we're going to work with, I'm going to set the 4.5s aside. So I'm going to work with the 5-inch squares here. So what I need to do is we need to draw a line down the center and sew a 1/4 inch on either side of it. I can do that, right? We've all done this before. You draw a line down the center with a friction pen, sew a 1/4 inch on either side of the line. Or we can use a tool. Let me take this friction line off so we don't have too many friction lines going here. Okay, I'm going to use a Creative Grids seam guide. This is the 9-inch seam guide. What this does is it shows me the center of the tool is right here in this groove. So I'm going to put my points of my square right in the groove, and I'm going to draw a line over here, and this is exactly 1/4 of an inch away from the center. I'm going to carefully spin this around and do it again. Draw the other side. Okay, just like this. So now, instead of sewing 1/4 inch on either side of the line, now I'm just going to sew directly on the line. I like that much better. All right, I'm going to put this on here. Let's go to the machine and do that. Okay, so we have our stitching. So I'm going to take just a 1.5 by 12.5. I just need a long straight ruler. This one's perfect. It's got my 1/4 inch mark on it. Line that up with a seam I just sewed and cut right down the middle. All right, let's press this. So I'm pressing toward the teal. I'm going to press away from my white. So I have my teal fabric is face up. I set my seam and press that over, just like that. All right. The next thing I need to do is I need to trim this up to 4.5 by 4.5. So I'm going to take my 4.5 by 4.5 inch ruler. Let's take one of these and put this on here. I'm going to use the diagonal line that's right down the center of this, right here in the middle of this. This thing is pretty close. I can see that there is a little bit to trim on all 4 sides, which is what you want. Move that friction pin out of the way. I like to trim up all 4 sides when I'm trimming up a square like this. But you see how quick and easy it is with a rotating mat. I'm not having to pick up my fabric or my ruler. They just stay right in one place and the whole project just spins around. Okay, so let's put a block together, all right? So we have our 2 white squares are going to come towards the center like this. And this is where it just gets totally scrappy. Whatever colors you want to put in here, just like this, all right? So let's put these 2 together, like that. I'm going to use my Clover extra fine patchwork pins, and the only place I'm going to pin on this is at the very end. Now the reason I'm pinning at the end and away from this edge is so I can start here and sew all the way down without having to remove my pins. I also know that by the time I get down to this side, these 2 corners are going to start walking away from each other, and I want them to stay put. So I put a pin here to remind them, stay there. I want those sewn like this. This one, I'm going to pin actually that seam. You can see that on the back. I'm actually pinning that on the back because I'm going to sew from here to here. Let's go do that. Okay, so one thing I want to mention is I did have a seam guide on my machine when I sewed those seams. I want to sew a perfect 1/4 inch because when I press these out, I need them to fit together and then fit together with an 8.5 inch square. So I don't want my seams to be off. So I did sew these with a seam guide on there by Guidelines. All right. All right, so now we're going to chain piece them together. I'm going to use a blade saver. I love this tool. We just set this on here and my seams come right apart. Then you're not having to struggle trying to cut with scissors on all these seams if you seam a bunch of these together. I like to chain piece when I sew, and a blade saver is a great way to do that. All right, let's press this. So I'm going to press both of these away from the points. I'm going to press them toward this edge like this. That looks good. This one, same thing. And you can see if I were just to open this up, you can see how this seam is kind of folding this direction, but this side definitely wants to go that way. That's the way we're going to let it go. I'm going to listen to the point. I'm going to let this go this way. All right. There we go. All right, let's put this together now. This is like this. This is like this, right? Okay, we're going to fold this one over. Now these seams have been pressed opposite, so now these seams in the middle are going to nest. I have a long thread there. So I'm going to hold this up so you can see how I'm nesting these seams together right in the middle. I'm going to use a pin, and I'm going to pin this just on the other side of this seam. I'm also going to pin the end. I don't want those corners moving. And if you wanted to, you could put a pin in the middle of this. You know, it only takes a couple of seconds to add a pin. It takes a lot longer to tear it out and redo it if it's not right. So I'm a firm believer in pins, all right? I use a pin. I would much rather take a couple of seconds and add a pin somewhere than not and wish I had. All right, there we go. So I'm going to sew here to here. I'll be right back. Okay, let's take out our pins and look at how we need to press this. Because now I have seams going everywhere, right? So I have this seam wants to go this way, this one wants to go this way. I have a problem in the middle. So guess what? We're going to press it open. So I'm going to heat that seam up, open my block. A wool pressing mat is the best. And I'm just going to divide this seam like this. And I'm just going to pull this right along. This little Panasonic iron has a really nice tip for pressing seams open. The seam just kind of falls open as that iron approaches it. I like that. I like a nice tip on an iron. I use that quite often. Whoops, I pressed that the wrong way though. There we go, let me fix that. Give it a little steam, remind it, I really do want you to go that way. There we go. All right. Perfect, that looks great. Okay, if I've done this right, this should measure 8.5. Let's grab my 8.5 inch ruler, see where we're at. Look at that. I'm right on the money. Okay? So, perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance is going to help you stay on track. It really does make it easy to keep a 1/4 inch seam allowance when you have a seam guide that's thick, hanging on right exactly where it's supposed to be. You just run your fabric right along it. You will love these seam guides. Your blade saver is a great addition here. A blade saver is going to help you with your chain piecing. Clip those apart really quick. Of course, a friction pen. New blade in your rotary cutter, especially when you're cutting multiple thicknesses in a layer cake or a charm pack. I definitely recommend a fresh blade in your rotary cutter. Take your old blade, put it in your blade saver. Now you've made use of it. extra fine patchwork pins with your magnetic pin cushion, wonder clips to help you with your binding. I have Aurifil Carrera thread set. This is a basic set. It's got black, white, and dark silver. I love that set. I piece basically with Aurifil these three colors. That's usually what we're using upstairs in the sewing room. I am using the white today. I have a Schmetz top stitch needle, and of course I have a seam ripper, but I didn't have to use it. That's pretty cool. All right, that's everything I've got on my table. That's everything you need to make a butterfly patch quilt just in time for summer. Happy sewing, and I'll see you next time on a Shabby Fabrics tutorial.